to society. WiTWA is a not-for-profit volunteer organisation. We're the leading advocate for diversity, inclusion and equity in Tech Plus. This afternoon, I'm very much looking forward to hearing from Jordan Foster on how we can work to ensure our digital wellbeing, a very pertinent topic right now. But first, I need to give a shameless plug for our upcoming conference and awards. So this year, we have a festival planned. Whilst COVID has meant we can't have our conference face-to-face, we have lined up an incredible group of people to share their insights and knowledge with us virtually over the week commencing Monday the 26th of October, culminating on Friday the 30th with a keynote speech from Dame Stephanie Shirley and our annual Tech Plus Awards ceremony. The festival will take place from 6 to 8 p.m. each evening and going a bit later on the Friday. All content will be available for consumption until the end of November. So if you miss out on the night, you're always able to catch up. I also want to remind you that voting for our People's Choice Award is still open, but you need to get moving because voting closes on the 7th of October. Details on where to go to buy tickets and how to vote are on the screen, but links can also be found from our website. One last thing to note, we're planning a live awards event, and this is a separate event to the conference. So whilst your conference tickets will allow you to view the live stream of the awards, it won't get you into Optus Stadium to help celebrate with the award nominees. Please watch our socials, the website, or join up as a member for details on how to get your tickets. They'll be released in coming days, and it's going to be an event to remember. Now over to Asher and Jordan. Thanks.
Hello.
Hello. Well, thank you. Welcome, Jordan. I'm really excited to be hosting you this afternoon, this evening, wherever people are joining us from. And I also would like to pay my respects to those traditional custodians of the land upon which we meet. So very excited to have Jordan Foster here. I think you can all agree that technology consumption and usage has definitely increased over the last few months. Both for myself from a personal perspective and as a mother of a 12-year-old boy, I keep getting regular notifications in terms of his screen time, and I do really wonder about how we can find that balance and have a wellness when it comes to technology, because we can all, benefit from it. And as we host this event this evening as well, to be able to learn to connect, certainly when people in lockdown and isolated and things like that, using that technology, there's certainly a lot of benefits as well. So very excited to have Jordan Foster here. Jordan's formally recognised as one of Australia's foremost cyber safety experts and was the winner of the 2020 Telstra Women in Business Emerging Leader Award, as well as the 2018 WA Young Achiever Award. She's provided countless hours and in terms of online safety education to over 100,000 students, families and staff, and also received the Business Award for her pioneering work in the field of cyber safety. So I'm sure you can all agree that she's an absolute expert in terms of keeping us safe, but also from a psychologist's perspective as well, in terms of ensuring that we're using it for our own wellbeing. I'll hand over to Jordan now to share some of her insights and research and a little bit more about herself, and then I look forward to a discussion soon after. Thank you.
Thank you, Asha. I'm going to bring up my slide deck. Thank you everybody for joining me today. This is such a pertinent topic, and I know a lot of people have been asking me a lot of questions around screen time and online wellbeing over the past few months, particularly during and sort of post-COVID. Some of you may even still be in sort of lockdown and still really having your life immersed and enmeshed within the digital world. So now more than ever, understanding the impact that technology has on our online wellbeing is incredibly important. So I'm going to share with you some of the ways that it might be affecting you, or you might find that some of the information that I present to you today is really relevant to your children. I have more of an adult focus today, but what you will find is the ways that technology providers and developers are hijacking our attention in a way. It doesn't just affect adults, it affects children. And then I'll give you some tips on things that you can do. So depending on your email use or social media use or technology use in general, you might find that, yes, some of this applies to me and some of this doesn't so much, but I'm hoping that everyone gets a few strategies that they can really utilize with their own technology behavior, and perhaps implement some things within your home as well. As I have been adequately introduced, my name is Jordan Foster. I'm from a company called ySafe. I'm the founder and managing director of the company. We provide cyber safety education and digital wellbeing education to school communities and organizations across the country. I, by background, am a clinical psychologist, and I have a particular interest in the impact of technology on mental health, and also particularly on young people with the impact of social media use and gaming on their well-being and going into the world of addiction, which is a really interesting space and affecting a lot of people. So what you're going to get today are some tips for me, but quite a insight into how technology and the brain function together. So I've got a lot to cover with you in a short amount of time. So hopefully I'm going to try and speak for maybe 20 minutes and then open the floor up to questions. But let's start with what we're going to cover. So I'm going to briefly touch on the attention economy, explaining what it actually is. A lot of people don't necessarily understand how our devices are actually maintaining our attention and engagement. If we understand that, then it provides us a little bit more knowledge to make informed choices about our online and tech behaviors. I'm going to talk about online activity and affect. Now, when I use the word affect, that is a very psychology term. Essentially, when we refer to affect, we are talking about the impact on your mood and on your mental health. So we'll talk about online activity and affect, just to explain the context of that word. Some people go, I think you've misused it. And then strategies for supporting your well-being when it comes to device use. So let's start out with persuasive technology and the attention economy. I find this incredibly interesting, the impact that technology has on us. Now, when it comes to the attention economy, what we actually need to see is that each of our attention is a scarce commodity. So essentially the goal of all platforms, whether it be a news platform, a social media platform, entertainment platform, the purpose of them is to capture as many people's attention as possible. Now, what's really interesting is that the CEO of Netflix, Reed Hastings, essentially was talking about the attention economy, and it's the goal of each of these platforms to ensure as many users' attention as possible. So engagement, and also how long can we keep their attention for. And there was an interview where he was talking about the attention economy. And what he said was that social media and entertainment services' biggest competitor when it comes to the attention economy, when it comes to capturing human attention, is actually sleep. Because the fewer hours that people sleep, the more opportunity there is for their attention to be maintained on devices. I find that quite ominous in a way, because what that's actually indicating is that their main competitors are not necessarily each other, but also just human general functions. And what we're actually seeing is that device use offers so many benefits. I'm not going to talk about them today, but I certainly know in research that device use offers benefits when it comes to stress management and engaging in social relationships, productivity, without doubt. But it's a scary world that we live in when people are trying to minimize sleep in order to commoditize our attention even more. And if we're aware of that, then we can do something about it for ourselves. The attention economy works essentially, to simplify it a lot, by using 3 primary tactics to keep users engaged and returning to platforms. So the first one is the intentional placement of content and ads to spark our interest. So using algorithms to understand what we like and what we're interested in to make sure that ads, or just content placement, so recommended videos on YouTube, are pushed to match our interest. Because if we're getting search results or recommended content that doesn't suit us, then we're not going to stay engaged with the content. The second is simulating social connection and inclusivity. So that could be, and I will talk about this later, faking social connection. Sometimes it's real, but sometimes it's fake, or a sense of inclusivity within certain online communities. And lastly, influencing our behavior to continue down a designated pipeline. This is very in relation to e-commerce, about certain things that you'll see built into e-commerce platforms that ensure that the behavior that they are seeking from us continues on. So we'll talk about a couple of these as we go through. Now, to break it down really simply, I like to think about that there are 3 primary persuasive pulls. that are generally affecting a normal person's life, if you will. The first one is actually associated with our devices. The second is with social media, and then the third is with games. So I'll talk a little bit about each one, but let's start out with devices. Now, what's really interesting is what we're seeing in early research is that our brains are starting to become hardwired to our relationship with technology. Now, because we can do so many things with a device, and again, a lot of them are positive, but our brain is now associating technology with something that's central to our needs, which means that when our brain sees technology or is near technology, it actually lights up. It's very receptive to that. There was a really interesting research study that looked into the impact that technology has on distraction. And what they actually found was that the mere presence of a smartphone actually decreased cognitive capacity. So what that actually means is just being around a smartphone that is not flashing, the screen is not on, that you're not even touching, but actually just being around the smartphone meant that your cognitive capacity was diminished. Now, the thing is that what we're finding again in regards to our brain is that suppressing our attempts to touch something is not a passive activity. It actually requires effort. So being around technology that we're not actively engaging with is actually an incredibly distracting task. That is applicable not only for adults, but also for teenagers. So the general piece of advice there is if you're not using a piece of technology like your phone, and you actually don't need it if you're on your laptop, the best idea that you can do is actually put it away and put it out of sight. You'll be more productive and be able to invest more of your cognitive abilities in that task by just not having it there. It's a great idea for teenagers as well while they're trying to study. When we talk about devices as well, devices are intentionally designed to maximize our attention and engagement with these platforms. I'm not even talking about social media, I'm just talking about the actual device that we are physically using. Here's one example about how they do that. Is that when we look at push notifications or badge icons on our devices, and I'm going to explicitly talk about iOS devices here, but this is applicable to all handheld devices essentially, is that psychologists actually work on these teams to ensure that they are capitalizing on cognitive biases to keep us engaged. If you interestingly go on the Xbox website to look at their team members and you look at their game development team, most of them have PhDs in psychology, which is a little scary, but okay, let's not go into that necessarily. But if we look at even these badge notifications, these badge icons, if we actually put them as a softer hue, so a green or a purple, we actually know that our brain is less receptive to these badge icons because our brain associates these types of colors as quite calming. It was not a coincidence that badge icons were designed to be red. And really, the primary reason for this is because our brain associates red with an emergency. So not only does that mean we're more likely to check our devices for that, but it also means that we're less likely to forget it. So let's just say that I have multiple badge icons on a social media or my email platform and I can't check it right now. There is always a part of my brain that's telling me I need to look at it because it's something that I need to resolve, which is problematic. So another strategy here is making sure that we only have notifications turned on for things that we actually need them for. So they could, and that's your choice. But what we're talking about here is, do we actually need them for social media? Particularly when we know that social media fake simulated social connection to make sure you open the app. So go through your phones and your devices and have a bit of an audit. Which apps do you actually need a notification for? Your messages might be one of them, because people message you when they need you. But something like Snapchat or Instagram, you don't necessarily need a notification because you can check that when you're ready to have a look at it. The other thing to think about here is that there are 3 different types of notifications on an iOS device. Do you need all 3 of them? So what I suggest is actually putting your social media notifications as a scroll down notification and not as a badge icon, because you can have a quick look at it there if you want to, but you're not being prompted constantly to actually have a look at the app. Okay, let's look at social media now, moving on from devices. Social media platforms intentionally design features to keep us engaged, even if we had no intention of spending that long on these particular platforms. A really commonly known one is infinite scroll. So our brain actually requires a visual cue in order to stop an activity in a relatively succinct way. So what that essentially means then is we need to get to an endpoint to know when to stop. Infinite scroll is designed to make sure that we don't know when that endpoint is. And so we require a different cue to tell our brain when to stop. Now, as adults, we get better at finding that cue, but as teenagers in particular, they do not have the cognitive capacity or development yet to generally be able to stop it themselves. So when you tell your children to get off social media and they don't realize how long they've been spending on there, it's because of some of these features that are built in a way, trick us. Push notifications insinuate to us that they require some sort of action from us, even though a lot of push notifications are not actually real. What you'll find Facebook is infamous for it, is that they'll actually simulate social relationships. So they'll send you a push notification, but they won't tell you what it's about. It would be easier for us if it did, but they don't, because they want you to open the app. And then they'll simulate social relationships such as your friends haven't heard from you in a while. You should post. But your friends don't care. They haven't requested this, but Facebook is making you feel like it is. So then you're engaging with the platform more. Social validation, when we actually get notifications and things like that on social media platforms, we actually have a reward center in our brain that activates, saying that we achieve something well. So that's how we sort of tie into the term addiction. And then time limitations is a newish feature over the past couple of years, where content disappears in order to push us to make sure that we're engaging frequently on these platforms. Not only when it comes to social media, but these platforms promote frequent and prolonged use by doing other certain things that are a little bit sneaky. One of them, and Instagram is notorious for this, is staggering the release of notifications to deliver bigger rewards. So if I post up a picture or a video and 50 people like it within the first 10 minutes, that means that when the activity goes down, I'm going to stop checking it. So what something like Instagram will do is actually only show me the first 10. And then later on, about an hour later, they'll show me another 10. So they stagger those release notifications, so I constantly go back to that particular platform. Many social media platforms actually intentionally have a slow feeding load so that you stay engaged and build suspense. As I mentioned, simulating human connection, which is actually not happening. And then this is a really common one that many people find frustrating, is the social reciprocity. So the pressure of actually waiting for someone's response and writing back. So the pretty typical one that we'll see is the 3 dots on iMessage, or someone saying someone is typing, or even just understanding that another person can see that you've read that particular post, which makes us feel obligated to write back. So all of these features actually influence our behavior in a way that's not necessarily something that we realize that we're not in control of. Looking at the impact of social media, here's a couple of stats for you. In 2020, an average user has 9 social media accounts across different platforms. The average time that a user spends on social media is 2 hours and 22 minutes per day. And Facebook, YouTube, and WhatsApp have over 2 billion active monthly users. Our social media is increasing significantly every year, but certainly has increased exponentially over the COVID period. The question that I get asked frequently is, how much social media time should I be having? Now, I would normally run this as an activity, but I won't have the time with you today, but you can do this at home by yourself. You have to figure out what your digital sweet spot is. Now, what's very frustrating about the research at the moment is that there's actually no set guidance on how long an adult should be spending online in order to support their well-being. There is for children and teenagers, but not for adults, which is tricky. But what research suggests is that everybody's is a little bit different. So let's have a look at this. You can do this as an activity, but research suggests that people who actually spend 1/3 of their leisure time on entertainment apps or social media apps per day, that's their sweet spot. It's where they get the maximum benefit from their social media and entertainment use. So a third or less of their specific leisure time. Now, the activity that I'd get you to do is going onto your device, maybe not right now, maybe when you've got some time, is going onto your device and having a look at how much time you're actually spending on social media or entertainment platforms. Now, I use an iPhone, so this is my screen time area here. I can actually see on Friday last week that I spent 49 minutes on social media. So if I calculate how much leisure time I have per day, then that is within the healthy limit. So I'm getting the most benefit out of that. So if you figure out how much leisure time do you have, if you're a parent, it's probably not going to be very much. But if you have no kids or all the kids, then you might have a little bit more time than that. So then referring to your actual online behavior. Now, a study for just more general guidance here, if you don't want to specifically go into how much leisure time do I have in my life, a study found that social media use group that was the happiest were those within the 30-minute group. So people who got 30 minutes of social media time per day were happier than those who got an hour, and who were happier than those who got 2 hours. So if you just want to have a general sweet spot rule, it was 30 minutes was associated with the best experience. Here's an online wellbeing tip. Use your phone's tools to set limits on your social media use. Your phone will have tools, irrespective of which technology platform you are using, they will have tools available to them. And then alternatively, some social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram actually have their own built-in tools. So if you're having a bit of a problem with TikTok going down the rabbit hole, then you can actually turn on their screen limits as well. So use what's available to you. You don't have to do it all by yourself. Now, gaming, just very briefly on gaming platforms. Interestingly, there are so many features and functions that are built into gaming platforms to keep players engaged. I'm just going to have a look at one of them, which as a gamer myself is probably my favorite one, but it's something called the Nemesis Effect. The Nemesis Effect is a cognitive bias that essentially how it works is that game developers will actually build in algorithms to assess the moment that a player is about to win a level or a game, depending on what they're playing. And once that moment of an almost win is identified, they usually increase the difficulty exponentially to encourage the loss. Now, what this actually equates to is what's called the Nemesis Effect. Our brain processes this as not a loss, but as almost winning. And if we almost won something, then what we're actually likely to do is go and do that particular behavior again. So these types of features are built into these platforms, and we're not realizing that they're actually impacting our behavior. We're just thinking that we just kind of lost it at the end, where what you actually find, it probably wasn't your fault. If you're a gamer, you're welcome for that information. Okay, let's have a look at how this affects our mood. This is a really interesting theory that's been applied to technology use, is the concept of ego depletion. Now, ego depletion is a concept in psychology that suggests that our self-control is a limited resource and can be depleted. This is very much in line with, we found this applied to diet, but we're also finding this is actually applied to technology use as well. So research is actually suggesting that the more that we are not resisting digital distractions, in fact, the more that we are actually engaging with technology, particularly work-related technology, outside of work-related hours, it's actually decreasing our productivity and increasing long-term impacts like depression, stress. So I know that's an easy thing to kind of highlight, and I'm certainly in the basket of being affected by this myself. But what we're actually finding, particularly in work-related smartphone use, that this particular study found the impact of work-related activity on self-control the following day. And what this particular study found was that there was a drainage of self-control the next day. And self-control in ego depletion is the ability to actually be disciplined and apply that energy to something the following day. So negative self-control implications were actually negated by quality sleep. So what this is suggesting then is that using your smartphone and doing work-related tasks after work actually impacts your productivity and well-being the consequent day. This is really important to know because there will be days where you need to do work. in the evening. But we are often of this mentality in 2020 that if I finish my work tonight, then I freed myself up tomorrow morning. But the problem is it is a perpetual cycle that we are always in, and it's actually impacting your well-being and productivity. Now, sleep is really important. When it comes to screen-based activities and sleep, we can actually see that using phones in bed and just before sleep impact our sleep quality in a poorer sense, unfortunately. We have decreased sleep efficiency and longer sleep onset latency. So this is about tech use in bed, which I'll give a suggestion about a little bit later on. The other thing that's affecting our well-being is the negative news cycle. Now, what we very likely know is that social media and just internet use in general, just based on cookies, influences what we see. Now, because of the negative news cycle and the clickability of it, what we're actually finding is that news online is impacting our well-being because we are often engaging with the scary or fear-mongering type of media content, which isn't our fault. We're driven to be worried about things that are scary and might affect us, so we stay on top of them. It serves an evolutionary function, but we're actually finding that this is directly impacting our well-being following our engagement with these particular platforms. So as hard as it is, my recommendation is do not click on things that are clickbait, because they're intentionally designed to scare you and worry you and use misleading headlines. But the thing is that very rarely will you actually use this news content to help you with something. Sometimes it will. The TikTok video that happened a few weeks ago, which was really awful, if you have children, it was good for you to know about that so you could stay away from it. But other misleading headlines that sensationalize things are damaging to us and actually not helping our well-being at all. So avoiding that content, making sure that you're making choices on what you're clicking on that's actually going to present you content that's helpful and credible. All right, let's think about email. I was watching a tech ethicist give a lecture, and he said that adults are addicted to email, and I think that I agree with that. Not by choice, but it's certainly impacting us. Now, this particular research study I'm going to mention throughout the next minute or so actually found that the average worker was interrupted every 10 minutes by digital alerts. The thing is that cognitively, it takes roughly 25 minutes to refocus back on our original task. That's roughly 2 hours spent every day trying to get back to full operating capacity. Now, what we tend to do is we tend to think that we're good at multitasking. And actually, we know that that is not, human beings are not good at multitasking. It actually decreases our productivity and increases our stress. And what's really interesting, and studies show that the better you think you are at multitasking, actually the worse you are at it objectively. So trying to jump between emails and our task is making us stressed, but actually making us less productive, which is really interesting. So what's the big deal about this constant checking of emails? So what we actually see in this particular research, going back to this, is that 85% of emails got a reaction within 2 minutes of arrival, which means that we are constantly checking emails. 45% of emails are spam, which means that we are getting distracted 45% of the time for something that's unimportant. The remaining 55% require information processing. Here's the interesting part of this particular study. It was found that people who check their emails as often as possible actually experienced more stress than the group who only checked their emails 3 times a day. But what's promising about this study is that they actually found that the people who only checked 3 times a day felt more productive than the people who checked frequently. So checking our emails frequently is actually giving us a sense of pressure and stress that is not doing our mental health any good. Okay, so going into a couple of strategies for you here. What are the red flags about your technology use? Okay, the quick model that I like to give you is the HER model. The health, emotions, and relationships. You need to think about the way that your technology use is affecting these 3 areas. That's how you're going to know if you're experiencing any impact with your digital well-being or tech habits. Now, keeping in mind, I mentioned a little bit earlier on that our brain has become accustomed to technology. Now, there is something within psychology called neuroplasticity. And essentially what it means, to make it very simple, is that our brain gives more real estate to things that we do more often. The reason that this model, health, emotions, and relationships, is really important is because our tech use directly impacts some of these factors in a positive or negative way. But if we're doing our tech habits more frequently, so to speak, and we're not taking care of our health or our emotions or our relationships, then our brain will stop giving real estate to those areas and it will do more for tech. Very simplified version, but it captures it quite accurately. This is how I like to think about it. If you're going to the gym and you're only working out one area in particular, and you're not focusing on any other areas as much, then you're sacrificing the health of some of those areas for other things. So a little bit of a crazy photo, but it kind of highlights it perfectly. So they're your red flags. Think about your her and how that's going. The other thing to think about, and this is really what I want you to take home from this, is the push and pull factors. When it comes to technology, there are factors in our personal life that, let's say, they push us to using the device, and there are things within the device that pull us into using it. So you need to think about, why did I just pick up my phone? What are the pull factors or push factors? And which ones are helpful to me and which ones aren't? Because they're not all bad. So for example, a push factor could be, I feel a little bit lonely and I really want to catch up with my friend. So something's going on in my personal environment that I'm being pushed into my device. That's not a bad thing at all. A pull factor could be a notification that you haven't posted in a while. So this is coming from my device and pulling me into it. That's not necessarily a positive impact, because I'm getting pulled to my phone for no important purpose. So if you have a reflection, and if you've got kids, you can even do this with them. Have a reflection on what your push and pull factors are and which ones are helpful for you and which aren't. Because it's about cutting out the unhelpful ones and keeping the helpful ones there. Couple of other just basic general tips. If you're working from home, set up your working day with structure and schedule tech breaks. Tech breaks are recommended every 2 hours for a minimum of 20 minutes. Consider when you're setting a schedule that you can set the more difficult tasks in the morning to decrease tech burnout. Your routine is really important. I highly recommend that you don't use your technology in your bedroom or on your bed specifically, because your brain associates your bed with technology then, and it actually makes it harder to sleep. And 2 to 3 p.m. is the time of least productivity. So give yourself a break and schedule some easy tasks for them. Tip 2, put smartphones out of sight between tech breaks. As I mentioned earlier, when you're actually doing a particular task on perhaps your laptop, you do not need to have access to your phone, and that's going to distract you more and create more stress. Practice proper sleep hygiene, which includes a couple of these factors here. Avoid screen time at least an hour before bed. This is handheld screen time, not so much TV. Implement a bedtime routine to strengthen your sleep associations. Avoid using your phone as an alarm where you can. Ensure adequate exposure to natural sunlight in order to get your circadian rhythm back to a normal level. Your tech use actually impacts your melatonin release. And remember other influences that impact your sleep, such as exercise, the sleep environment, your diet, things like that. Turn off work notifications for your emails after hours. I know this is going to make you shudder, but your performance will be much better for it. And then as a consequent part of that, schedule checking your emails 3 times a day. We actually know that's the most productive amount, and also the amount that's causing you the least amount of stress. So first thing in the morning, around lunchtime, and then obviously closer to the end of the day as well. Turn off your video on video calls. Now, because we're doing so many more of these a day, we can actually see a couple of things. One is that you often probably feel very tired after you've done a video call. There's 2 primary reasons for that. One is because, and I'm even doing it now, but we are naturally inclined to look at ourselves in the camera. Human beings actually don't function very well with mirrors. We're not actually supposed to see our reflection, and we have a natural fascination with how we look and how we're being seen by other people. So we actually either are looking at ourselves or we're trying hard not to. So turning off your camera will decrease the stress around that. And then the other thing is that because there are fewer cues that you can bounce off of when you're having a video call conversation. Your brain actually has to be more vigilant about engaging with people because they have less cues to go by. That's why it's actually more exhausting to have a video call than a face-to-face meeting with the exact same amount of people. Set up devices to limit distraction. All devices have settings that you can implement. Some are better than others, but certainly making that effort to do that. And to finish off on this point, this is how we suggest, or some of the things that you can do to do that. So set up your home screen properly. The main things that should be on your home screen are tools. Google refers to social media as slot machines, and then aspirational type of apps, so things that you would like to use a little bit more. Your home screen should be with things that are based on productivity and aspirations that are going to support your well-being. Move social media platforms or gaming platforms further away so they're more effort to scroll through to get there. Use your phone's conscious filter, so it's actually swiping down and typing in what you're looking for to decrease the distraction of other apps. Use your control center to stop skipping through certain steps. So you can change these functions down here to be things that are actually beneficial to you. So if you just want to use the calculator, you're not having to scroll through and noticing that you've got a notification for something else, or thinking, oh, maybe I'll just jump on my online banking. Organize your apps. Google also refers to keep the candy, hide the wrappers. They had an experiment where they found that they had a bowl of candy, and people were less likely to take candy if it was just sitting there, as opposed to if it was wrapped in colorful wrappers, they were actually more likely to take more candy. So people were attracted to the colors, not necessarily to the candy itself. So same thing, put them in app folders so they look a little bit less attractive. Other phones, you can actually make your phone into grayscale, which is essentially the same thing. Use the vibration signature for actual people, which is really a great thing that you can do. So I know that when my phone vibrates in my pocket, that it's actually my boss, for example, or my husband, or someone who's actually important to me that I need to check. But if I get a certain vibration from different notifications for different platforms, I know that that can wait. And then also, lastly, as I mentioned, turn on notifications only for important platforms. So go through and curate your feed to say what's important to me and what's not. What do I need a notification for? So for example, we use Slack in our office, and that is important because I know that if someone's contacting me on Slack, that they've got something quick but relatively urgent. So instead of sending an email, they'll put something on Slack. So I want my notification on for that. But I might not want it on for other things like Facebook, where people aren't contacting me about anything that's urgent or specific. So I want to go on there when I make that particular choice. I don't want notifications telling me you haven't been on for a while, because that's not me making an active choice about my online activity. Okay, I zoomed through that last part, but I think we will leave it there. If anyone has any questions, Asha, I think they can pop them in and they will be brought over here, I imagine.
Absolutely, yes. I think, did you want to stop sharing your screen and
Yes.
we'll have, perfect. As much as we say around video calls and things like that, I've got when you said that only limiting to 2 a day, and I thought, oh my goodness, I remember sitting in back-to-back meetings online during COVID and just being absolutely shattered, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that in terms of their minds were already stressed and then suddenly just, it was exhausting.
That's it. And a lot of people didn't realize why. They actually thought video calls would be easier because you're kind of in the comfort of your own home and it's, you know, face to face. But people were finding they were becoming exhausted. And that's why you're actually trying to process more information than what you would do if you were face to face.
Absolutely. We're starting to get a few questions coming through, so please everyone put them through and we'll do our best to answer them. I'm conscious that we did start a little bit late, so we'll continue going for a little while. I'm sure everyone is absolutely fascinated. I was madly scrambling to write down some notes. We've had a question as to whether you are able to share some of these tips as a PDF or something like that. Is that going to be possible?
Yes, I haven't got one, but I can make one. I'll put it together as a PDF and you can have it there, refer back to it. It's a good talking point with the family as well. I often tell my husband, he doesn't like it, but I tell him.
I can just imagine you've got all these little things all around the house, as little prompts and reminders and things like that. So, and I know that, you know, even just within the WiTWA members and things like that, there's been a few other questions coming through. A fantastic one here around what tips do you have to bring your kids along on that digital wellness journey? I know when I say to my son to turn off his phone or you know, go to bed or whatever it might be, and he, you know, quite quickly turns around and goes, well, Mum, you're online and you're on your phone, why do I need to do it? And then I don't really have a response except to say that, well, I'm your mum and you will listen to me, but I do kind of at the back of my mind thinking, yes, that's probably a good point that I could reduce it. So how have you sort of coached people or supported people in that journey as a family?
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of things, but you've touched on the perfect one, Asha, which is modelling. So it can be really tricky, but modelling this behaviour to young people is really important part of bringing them on the journey, because we can tell them what to do, but we risk our own credibility when we're not doing it as well. We're kind of saying, you know, if we're having a diet and we're telling our children to eat vegetables, but then we're eating McDonald's for dinner every night, what we're saying is, I believe this for you, but I don't really believe this for me. And sometimes that applies to kids and adults differently, but when it comes to tech, not really. Sometimes it's you can say to kids that I'm doing less fun stuff like checking emails, but at the same time, what you're trying to promote is this message of well-being and balance. And if you're not doing that either, then you know they're gonna challenge you on that. So modeling is really important. But when it comes to kids, what I suggest is talk to them. And I know that sounds like a really simple point, but they, particularly at primary age level, when they get a little bit older as teenagers, they will challenge you, which is a normal developmental kind of milestone. But when young kids are curious about technology and excited about it, you can start that journey with them by talking about how great it is, but then also saying, look, there's things that we all need to look out for, including me. And what I suggest is don't tell them what to do. Go and look, all of this content, there's some brilliant YouTube videos on what we've spoken about today. There's some great stuff online. I mean, the Social Dilemma just came out recently. That use tools to sit down with your child and watch it with them and then say, wow, what do you think about that? Because if it's not about you telling them, but you sharing something with them and then having a conversation with them about it, kids are so much more receptive to the message. The other thing is that be honest about your own tech use. So if you're starting the journey, sit down and watch content with them, talk about it, about how great it is, but then talk about, oh, there's some features and functions built in that are trying to trick us, and how do we make sure it doesn't trick us? And if it's not about the kids or your mum and dad, it's about all these bad guys over here trying to trick me and I'm not going to let them, then kids are more receptive to the message, which is really good. But my final point on that is, if you're having a hard time as an adult, it's totally okay for you to share that with your child. So for example, if I'm not modeling the perfect behavior, but I'm trying to tell my child, you know, screen time balance, but I'm not doing that as an adult, that's a great learning opportunity for me to say to my child, you know what, I'm not doing as best as what I would like to do. But that's because I feel like with my emails, I feel like I can't get off them. I feel like people are expecting me to reply to them and I kind of have to. Oh, what do you think I should do about that? How do you think I should solve that? Because if you get kids to help you and you're honest, and that is bringing them more into the conversation. So use any mistakes that you're making, so to speak, as a really good learning opportunity for them and in turn for you. So it's all about communication.
Excellent. Well, if I could get my son off a fortnight long enough in order to have that conversation with him. But no, look, I think that's a really sort of practical and you know, looking after our own well-being is so critical. But as you say, it's always that journey. So I think that's such a practical. I've got so many notes that I'm like scribbling down. One of the other questions that's come through, so it says, great with all the statistics to support things that should really be common sense. I find the most challenging thing is to form new habits. It's so hard to fall back to old ways when you're busy or tired. Like, what sort of tips do you have? And I think that that's, you know, it applies to your digital well-being, but also, you know, I know I probably ate, I have seen some people come out of like isolation being really fit and they seem to make the most of the time. I probably didn't. I developed a very big consumption of chocolate and more comfort foods and things like that, and came out with a COVID belly. So I know that the habits are so crucial. But again, what are some of those tips from a psychologist's perspective to make those habits stick?
Yeah, it's a great question. And generally I find that the way that we think about habits is completely wrong. So, which is really interesting, but habit forming is really contingent upon motivation, and human motivation is a very feeble thing. So one of the biggest mistakes that we do as humans is we set goals that are far too high. So what we actually do is we are too much about the end game or too much about the outcome. So if I compare this to weight, for example, if I said to myself, I want to lose 10 kilos, and then that becomes my goal, it is too much and it's too difficult to achieve because it's not going to happen rapidly. Where I would start, it's okay to think I want to lose 10 kilos, but you actually need to say, okay, now that's the end goal. The first goal I have is losing 1. And that's the only thing you should focus on, is 1. And then when you get to that 1, then you recreate your next goal. It's the biggest demotivating factor when our goals are too high. So I've said some of these strategies today, but what I don't recommend to anyone is right now going, okay, I'm going to do all of them. Don't. Just give yourself very, very, very small goals. The good thing, it's a little brain hack. But because we have a reward center in our brain that's all about goal achievement, when you achieve a certain goal, that part of your brain actually becomes activated and it gets reinforced. So you learn, you teach yourself, oh, that felt good, that was really good, I did that, and I can do the next one. So you actually need to set yourself smaller goals over a shorter period of time. And when you start achieving those, make them a little bit bigger and longer. But you've already given your brain the foundation of achieving that goal. It takes about 28 days to reinforce a habit, but you shouldn't just do that habit from day 1 to day 28. You should be doing partial parts of that to get to the end goal at 28 days. So my suggestion would be to you, if you're going to, say, for example, limit your email checking. So you've been checking it several times an hour all day, and you want to get to 3 times a week, 3 times a day. For the next week, just try and set an alarm every hour to check your email. And then over that week, if you can achieve that, that's great. And then the following week, then you'll adjust that goal. So start small. And if you're actually not achieving the goal, you've set it too high. So go back and make it smaller. There was an interesting research study that was looking into people having motivation to go to the gym. And so what they actually found for people that went to the gym consistently for the first week was actually less likely to do it in the following week compared to the group that just put on their gym clothes in the first week. The people that just put on their gym clothes in the first week were more likely to go to the gym consequently after that. And it's because their brain was achieving goals that was a much more feasible and palatable and sustainable than going too hard too soon.
Excellent. Look, I think that's, and there's so many questions I'm sure that will come through, and we'll definitely make sure for all of those in the audience that we do a wrap up and capture all these amazing tips. I think that's probably a really good point just to finish for today. It's we're meant to be unwinding rather than suddenly
getting excited.
So much that they're thinking, oh my goodness, that was. So a huge thank you, Jordan. And I know that if we were able to have everyone for live events, we're very excited that we have the awards night coming up where we can actually all reconnect face to face again. So we've been a little bit hesitant to do that. But look, that was brilliant and really, really timely as well. So really thank you for that, Jordan. I don't know if you've got any final words before I hand over to Tracy.
No, I think that's it. It's just being about reflective of your own behaviours and adjusting as necessary. So the fear-mongery stats sort of throw them out the window. It's just about you and your drivers for your tech use, understanding why how they can be influenced without you knowing is really helpful. But just reflecting on how it's supporting your well-being and any parts of it that isn't, and then you can adjust from there. So it just takes a moment for you to be self-reflective, but it's certainly a worthwhile moment to have.
Excellent. No, thank you so much for that, Jordan. And Tracy, I'll let you wrap it all up. Thank you.
Hi there. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Jordan, and thank you, Asha. That was absolutely fantastic. I was definitely, paying full attention and really interested to hear the whole psychology behind devices and social media. Full disclosure though, at some points I did find myself reaching over for my phone, and that's probably when I realized, what you were talking about, you were talking to me, I have a problem. But now that I know about it, I can do something about it, which is great. So I think the first thing I'm choosing to do is switch off the notifications, especially on my email, because as soon as that little envelope pops up, I want to just jump in and see, who's messaged me and why have they messaged me. I know that, we're online at the moment, but I think there's a little bit of power in being able to make the choice that, yes, I've chosen to be here, I've chosen to be online, and this is actually adding value to my life, which makes it, all the more better. So as everyone said, we're really looking forward to the month of October at WiTWA. We have our virtual conference that's running from the 26th to the 30th. If you have not seen the events page yet, there's quite an interesting array of topics that are going to be covered in the virtual conference. So, going around the world, just looking at amazing tech that people are doing. There's diversity and inclusion, and it's really practical in terms of the change makers and challenges and strategies that are really practical that you can apply for diversity and inclusion. We're talking about careers for the future, and then we're also talking about mentors, sponsors, and allies. So as that part of that discussion, we want to discuss what's the right support to get and what's the right timing for you to get those different types of people in your life. The speaker list is very impressive. I am super excited to hear all of them. So we've got Emma Isaacs, who's the CEO of Business Checks. We've got Dominic Price, he's a work futurist at Atlassian. Julian Guthrie, also of Alpha Girls. Everyone just phenomenal in their own right. And then finally, Tech Plus Awards, People's Choice voting until the 7th of October. And then tickets are going to be released for the Tech Plus Awards, the in-person at Optus Stadium sometime next week. They are going to be very limited. So if you're keen to join us for a bit of a party and of course the awards, definitely get your ticket as soon as they are released. So thank you for joining us. We're really glad to spend this past hour with you. We've learned a lot. We're going to try to make Jordan's notes available to everyone on our WiTWA page, and then the recording of this session as well. If you want to play it back and just listen to it with your families and significant others, we're going to have that option available to you as well. Thank you, everybody, and have a good evening going forward.